Matt Olson and Chris Sale were nominated for Gold Gloves, but Spencer Schwellenbach and Michael Harris got robbed. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Wednesday, October 16th, your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. He's Christian Rauh. You can find him on Twitter at Christian S. Rauh, R-A-U-H. He has his spooky season black background up. I love it. You can find all of our written work, bravestoday.com, and then you can find the show, Braves_today on Twitter. We have a Facebook page, Instagram as well. Go follow us all those. If you're listening, whether it's audio or video, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review on the audio feed. We have to get 20 of those for the discovery algorithms to really kick in and help people find the show. And we're trying to build that audio side up. So if you do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. We'll read all of the good ones on the show. So maybe go do that. And we'll do that on something like a Friday. Christian, I want to get into the 40-man roster this offseason, some moves you might see, and how the Braves can use it to their advantage, right? We dropped this piece on the Substack a few days ago. But before that, the Gold Glove nominations came out yesterday. Atlanta has 2 Gold Glove representatives, 4 starting pitching. Chris Sale is in there with Luis Severino of the Mets, Zach Wheeler of the Phillies. It's an entire NL East finalist group here. So I guess in the NL East, just like the SEC, it just means more. This is something Wheeler won it last year, obviously. Severino graded out even better than Wheeler did as far as defensive runs saved. Sale, it's the first time he's been a Gold Glove finalist since 2017. So really excited that he's up there. They're all in the top 6 for pitchers. I think it's a good choice here. And then at first base, Matt Olson is in that group, along with Bryce Harper of the Phillies and Christian Walker of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, Walker's the big favorite here. He won it in 22 and in 23. He led all NL first baseman and outs above average this year. This is something where Harper was second at +8. The spread here, Walker was at +13. But Matt Olson, who has won it twice in his career, 18 and 19 with Oakland, he is first in defensive runs saved with 14, 6 more than any other first baseman in baseball. So depending on what way you measure this, Matt Olson could legitimately upset Christian Walker. I don't know if he will, but he could. And if you're curious how they come up with these, 30 MLB managers and then up to 6 coaches from each team vote from a pool of players. They cannot vote for their own team. So don't think that like Rob Thompson of Philly was stuff in the box for his guy. And then the Sabre defensive index is 25%. So 75% is those votes. 25% is the index. But I think Atlanta should have had more. The big one to me is Spencer Schwellenbach. Okay. We mentioned Severino had 5 defensive runs saved. He threw 182 innings. Zach Wheeler threw 200 innings. Chris Sale threw 177.2. And on DRS, Sale was at +4. Severino at +5. Wheeler was at +3. The MLB leader for all pitchers in defensive runs saved was Spencer Schwellenbach at +7. Now, he only pitched 123 and 2/3 innings. And so you do have the what is more valuable to go all season or to be an exceptional defender in the games that you're actually in. But I would argue on something like a rate stat, if you can outproduce the entire rest of baseball on less innings than everybody else, you deserve to be in this list because it's enough where we know it's not a fluke. We know that Spencer Schwellenbach didn't get lucky. This dude was a college shortstop at Nebraska. And I went back and checked some of the draft reports. He was actually a day 1 prospect as a position player because his defense was so good at shortstop. Is it wrong of me to think that despite the innings, Spencer Schwellenbach should have been a nominee for Gold Glove in the National League?
Absolutely not. No, he definitely should have been one. It's like you're punishing him for being young, for starting off his season in Double A. It's like you're punishing him for that, and I don't think that's right because, as you mentioned, it's a rate stat. If you can find a way in only your 120 innings compared to the close to 200 for all the other three finalists, if you can find a way to still be on top of that list with 80 less innings, then you absolutely deserve to be in that conversation. Yes, Spencer Schwellenbach should be a Gold Glove finalist, regardless of how many innings he pitched, regardless of the fact that he didn't come up until just a couple months into the season.
Mhm.
Let me remind you, it's not because he was punished and pushed down into the minors. It's not because he was injured. So it was not an availability question.
He
It
started in
was
Double
because
A.
he was in Double A. Yes. So yeah, he should be definitely a finalist. But my question would be, who would you take out? Would it be Chris Sale or would it be one of the other two?
See, and I think, and that's the other part of all these conversations. Whenever you say this guy should be in there, who has to come out? And if you look at the criteria that they used, they go in here and they're pointing out that Wheeler DRS wise was at +3, and he's the defending Gold Glover. Severino was better than him. Sale was in the middle. I would argue that Wheeler being behind both of them in runs saved, despite leading all three in innings, you probably have to take him out to put Schwellenbach in. Simply because, again, this is a rate stat. The more you play, the more chances you have to accumulate this. And 200 innings, he was at +3. Sale was at +4 in almost 25 less innings. And Severino was at +5 in 18 less innings. So, one, Schwellenbach is on pace to have like over 10 defensive runs saved if he played a full season. But also, like, Wheeler did the least with the most opportunities, I'd argue. So it should be Wheeler coming out of this. But when you have coaches voting on this and he's the winner last year, he's going to make it in off a reputation. Either way, I think the big takeaway here is that the Atlanta Braves pitching staff will continue to dominate the Gold Glove Awards as they have in their career. Phil Niekro won 5, including 3 straight from 78 through 80. Greg Maddux has the most Gold Gloves of any player in baseball history. He won, I believe it was 9 consecutive from 93 through 02. Max Fried won 3 consecutive, 20 through 22. Schwellenbach's primed to win, I would argue, to be the favorite for probably the next 6 years to win Gold Gloves. Because again, dude was a college shortstop and is amazing defensively. Am I
I
wrong for
agree
thinking
with
that?
you.
Oh, Mike Hampton in 03. Mike Hampton also won one
Oh,
in
yeah.
03. That's right.
I agree with you saying Wheeler should be the one taking out. And for anybody who's saying you can't have two Braves pitchers in as
You
finalists,
can.
on the American League side for the Royals, Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo are finalists in this one. So you definitely can. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's not one per team. It just it's
This is
ranking
the
the
only
best.
position where you can have more than one player, right? You
Right,
can't do that
correct.
anywhere else. Here you can.
Could you do it for utility? If technically you probably could, right?
If you had 2 utility guys who played enough, I just feel
Yeah, I
like you
doubt you would,
probably
but
like the odds of if anybody was going to do it, a hurt Braves team this year was going to do it. But no, it happened. I do want to address Michael Harris II. Yes, he missed a bunch of time. Okay. So we'll acknowledge that up front. The nominees, Brenton Doyle of the Rockies, Jacob Young of the Nationals, those two are amazing defenders. They deserve to be up there, right? But Blake Perkins of the Brewers, the issue with putting Blake Perkins in there for me is the fact that he didn't play, I don't believe he played that many more innings than Michael Harris did. He had 956 in center. Harris had 961. Perkins was up all year. He just didn't play. He made just over 100 starts. That was something where he was healthy and they just chose not to play him. If his glove was really Gold Glove caliber, they'd put him in the lineup every day. Jacob Young didn't hit really well and he played every single day because his glove was that good. Now, it's hard for me to argue that Michael Harris, who 8+8 fielding run value, it's hard for me to argue that he should have made it over Pete Crow Armstrong, who tied Jacob Young at +16 with the same number of innings as Michael Harris. But I do think you have a case for if Blake Perkins is not in there, there's a lot of National League guys I think you could have gone in. Jackson Merrill could have been in. Michael Harris could have been in. PCA could have been in. Michael Ciani and the Cardinals could have been in. You had a lot of situations where many more guys should have been in over Perkins. I guess really Schwelly was robbed. Harris wasn't robbed. He was overlooked. But you have to feel good about if Michael Harris can get a full healthy season, he has a chance of breaking into that top 3. Although I will say PCA, Jacob Young, Britton Doyle, that's going to be a really good top 3 for a long time. But I still maintain if this dude can stay healthy for an entire season, he is going to be a Gold Glove finalist at some point in time in the next few years.
The crazy thing about the National League center field Gold Glove race for the next 5-6 years, Lindsay, is that you could be Gold Glove caliber and finish 8th. That could happen. You mentioned all those names: Michael Harris. You mentioned Doyle, Pete Crow Armstrong,
Young,
Corbin Carroll.
Ciani.
Still, there's so many. There is probably
Corbin Carroll gets hurt because they play him in right a lot. They move him from left to his arm isn't that great. I think he doesn't always stay in center because Alek Thomas plays center a bunch, but he's Gold Glove caliber as well when he's healthy. They just don't play him in there enough.
Yeah, he probably will never be a finalist, but he has the caliber type defense. But I do agree with you. I do think that Michael Harris can wind up being a finalist at some point in his career if he stays healthy and gets on the field and does exactly what he needs to do. I think that you're absolutely right about the Perkins conversation. I think that this is the biggest one that probably was the easiest when it's all said and done. It'll be the easiest one to say he's in 3rd place when it's all said and done because of the other 2 guys in the mix of Doyle and who's the other finalist? There's so many good
Doyle
ones
and
who
Young.
actually. Young. Yeah. There's so many actually good ones. I forgot who actually was the finalist. But yeah, no, I do think that Michael Harris at some point will be a Gold Glove finalist. But I'm with you. Schwellenbach was robbed. Harris was just overlooked. I like the way you said that.
Thank you. In just a minute, we're going to get into the 40-man roster. You've got 46 guys on there right now because of people in the 60-day roster. You've got to pare that down. But I think Atlanta has an opportunity that the rest of the league doesn't to add value and find some low-cost, high-reward players for next season. We'll do that next right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay, Crosby, Christian Rauh. Just broke down the Gold Glove nominations again. Spencer Schwellenbach got robbed. Michael Harris was overlooked. But I do want to also look at it. I published this piece on Sunday on the Substack. Again, bravestoday.com. It's free. Go read it. But when you get to 5 days after the World Series, you have to do a lot of your work to clean up your 40-man roster. Guys who are on the 60-day injured list do not count for a 40-man roster spot. So Atlanta has 46 players on their 40-man roster right now. And that's common in the league. A lot of teams have more than 40. You can't put a guy back on the 60-day IL until pitchers and catchers report, right? And then, fun fact, their 60 days don't actually start counting until the season starts. So you pretty much, you don't put a guy on the 60-day IL unless either you need to make a roster move or they're not going to be back probably all season. But I think the Braves are uniquely positioned to make some moves that other teams aren't able to do. Because Atlanta, they were the only team entering spring training last year, the only teams that had open spots on their 40-man roster were the Braves and the Padres. And towards the end of spring training, Atlanta still had open spots on the 40-man roster. When they signed Adam Duvall, they didn't have to make a corresponding move to add him. They had a 40-man spot available. And so what this does for Atlanta is this gives them the opportunity to pick up guys that at a lower cost than other teams. They're still paying a salary. They're still having to use a roster spot. But everybody else, before they add a player, they have to say, Who are we willing to potentially lose to add this guy? If your 40-man roster's full, you have to DFA somebody, designate him for assignment, take him off the 40-man roster so that you can get somebody on. A lot of guys, when that happens, if they have enough service time, they choose free agency. Maybe they get claimed off of waivers. You can lose that dude. Atlanta doesn't have to do that. And when you look at the 40-man roster, I really feel like there's more advantages to be had when it comes to finding pitchers than when it comes to position players. Am I wrong for thinking that this is legitimately a competitive advantage that the Braves have?
No, because we saw what happened in full swing last year. There was multiple times that they used this to their advantage to fix a roster or construct the roster the way they needed to, and it
Mhm.
came in handy when all the injuries came about. But the biggest one that comes to my mind, Lindsay, is that big five team trade, or not 5 team, 5 player trade that they used to clear up the 40-man roster at the beginning of the season.
Yeah. Last offseason, they go and they send 5 players to the Chicago White Sox for Aaron Bummer, right? Off top of my head, I know it was Michael Soroka, Nicky Lopez, Braden Shoemake, Jared Schuster, and there's some 5th player that's driving me nuts, and I can't think of who it was, but they were able to go and move 5 guys. And I think 4 of them, if not all 5, were on the 40-man roster. Riley Goins was a minor leaguer. There you go. So they cleared 4. They technically cleared 3 40-man spots because they had put Bummer on, but they got 4 guys out. And I feel like you're going to have something like that this year. Okay. We know that there's, like, position player wise, there's a bunch of locks, right? You're bringing back the 4 outfielders, Soler, Kelnick, Acuna, Harris for sure, right? Your 2 utility guys, Luke Williams probably makes it. Eli White probably makes it. Chadwick Tromp probably makes it. He'll be battling with Drake Baldwin for the 3rd spot, barring a trade, but he'll still be safe on the 40-man roster. You got to figure out Gio Urshela, Ramon Laureano, Whit Merrifield. Art, what do you do? Do you bring guys back or not? Kevin Biggio, all of that. But on the pitching side, I think is where you really clear a bunch of spots. Okay. Because locks, when it comes to locks, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 starters and 6 relievers that are absolute locks to come back. So Chris Sale, Spencer Strider, Spencer Schwellenbach, Renato Lopez, Grant Holmes, Ian Anderson, AJ Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop, Bryce Elder. Those guys are all locks to come back. People don't like Bryce Elder. He is a useful piece to have as a spot starter. All right. That's 9 potential starters just from that list, not counting if you bring a guy in free agency or a trade or whatever. The last 4 years, 21 through last season, the Braves used somewhere between 10 to 13 conventional starters. So having 9 as you enter the postseason is useful. Okay. Relievers, Raisel Iglesias, Joe Jimenez, Pierce Johnson, Aaron Bummer, Dylan Lee, Daisable Hernandez. We know those 6 guys are all back. You've got options on what to do on other guys. Ray Kerr recovering from Tommy John. Angel Perdomo recovering from Tommy John. Technically a question. We don't know. AJ Minter's a free agent. Max Fried's a free agent. We don't know if those guys will be back. Minter may come back. I do think the Braves are going to have to sign a lefty. We'll talk about that maybe tomorrow. We don't know about Max Fried, but we're all expecting not, right? But there's guys that are not going to come back, right? Or that probably should not come back. Dylan Dodd. Atlanta used 13 different starting pitchers this year, and not once did they think Dylan Dodd was in that group. He ended up working as a reliever in Gwinnett in the month of August, never got an MLB appearance. His 40-man spot's probably gone. He could be a candidate to be one of those 5-for-1 trades with somebody. Alan Winans, 0-2 with a 15.26 ERA. They did not call him back up. He's probably not safe on the 40-man roster this year. Think about Darius Vines. Similar thing happened to Darius Vines. He made a couple starts. He got shelled. They ended up DFAing him, and then they sent him to Double-A. Alan Winans is either going to be traded, which he probably has a little bit more value than Vines, simply because Winans was actually good in Triple-A. He was like player of the month in the International League 1 month. Not worth a ton, but he's a quad A guy, I think. Winans probably gone. Huascar, he's eligible for arbitration. He's out of options. So if you put like in spring training, you either have the end of spring training, you either have to put him on in your bullpen, or you have to um, send him down to AAA. And I believe he can either elect free agency or you have to expose him to waivers or something like that. You can lose him. The point is, because you don't have the ability to just option him down. So he probably gets a minor league deal if he comes back at all. He's probably not on the 40 man. You can clear up, I would like, and I break it all down to the piece. I think you can clear up 4 spots on the 40 man roster going into the offseason just based on some really basic moves of getting rid of guys that you haven't used and aren't in your future plans.
And that's important too, because I don't think we've even touched the fact that there's going to come a point in time this offseason where you have to start worrying about protecting your guys for the Rule 5 draft. We haven't even got to that portion yet, which I think that could be a whole nother episode or at least a segment at some point this offseason. But you make really good points on every single one of those players that could be on their way out, should be on their way out, could be a part of a package. And I think that's a really good idea. The question is, though, Lindsay, who would be a good replacement? Do you have any ideas of maybe a guy that would make the most sense as one of those 40-man spots in the offseason? Like, do you have a suggestion?
Yeah. For the record, we'll do a whole show on or a partial show on the Rule 5 stuff. There's, I think, 5 guys in Gwinnett that are Rule 5 eligible this upcoming year. And I'm not protecting any of them, but we'll get to that later. I think there's a couple things you can do here. I think one, you can stash some injured arms. We saw them do that with Angel Perdomo, right? He had Tommy John. They threw him on the 40-man roster. Just he was on the IL all year. They didn't worry about it. They didn't need the spot. And I think the other thing is you can grab some guys that can be relievers you try to convert into starters. So when I look at the Tommy John guys, the stashes here, I've got 3 names that I'm thinking about. I don't know how much they're going to cost. There'll be different costs, right? Shane Bieber was really good with the Guardians, looked fantastic when he debuted this year. Boom, Tommy John, after I think he either left his first start or right after his first start. He's a guy, maybe you sign him a reduced salary for 25 while he rehabs, and then the salary goes up for 26. That might be an option. Lucas Giolito has the ability to opt out of his deal with the Boston Red Sox. I don't know if he will or not. It depends on how his rehab's going. If he thinks he can get more money from somebody else, maybe like Chris Sale, he doesn't love the environment there or whatever. He wants to be on a more competitive team. Maybe he opts out. Trevor Gott of the Oakland A's is a free agent. He's a guy that I could see them probably getting the cheapest of those 3. He's never been amazing career of 465. He's more of he's a reliever, not a starter. It's entirely possible they either try to convert him. He is one of those guys, we've seen Atlanta do this a lot. Their underlying numbers look better than their actual performance. With the Mets, 34 games last year. He was also with Seattle. He got moved midseason. Overall ERA of 4.19, right? His fielded independent pitching with Seattle was under 3. It was bad defense. It was some bad luck. That's the kind of guy, it reminds me of Aaron Bummer. Aaron Bummer's ERA was off with the White Sox, but his fielded independent pitching was much better, and his underlying peripherals were also really good. And so they took a shot on him. Last year, Gott's home run rate, 1.5%, was less than half of the MLB average of 3.1. His exit velocity allowed was below average. His hard hit rate was below average. A lot of his inputs were really good. He just didn't have the results that you would expect. Partly his batting average of balls in play was like 345. Like he had some bad luck, bad defenses behind him. I really think a guy like that's the kind of guy Atlanta likes to go for. Those guys that they feel like some minor tweaks, a better environment, they can do really well. Anybody that I'm missing, you think off of that like big Tommy John list there, or any thoughts on those kind of guys?
Yeah, I didn't think that's the route you're going to take, but that's an exciting route. It makes a lot of sense that you would go to a guy and stash them. I like the Trevor got one. I thought he had, although his numbers didn't look the greatest in 2022, before in his last full season before his injuries happened, he was pretty good with the Brewers. I thought when he would come in, he was a great leverage guy. You didn't have him as a high leverage situation, but you brought him in the 6th or 7th inning, and you felt pretty comfortable when you watched him pitch. So I would actually love to see Trevor Gott. I think he would be a great fit for this Brave system. Take that Dylan Lee kind of position in the
Right-handed Dylan
bullpen.
Lee. You're going to have to use
Oh,
Dylan Lee in
yeah.
more leverage spots because you may be losing AJ Minter. I think he's a great replacement to come in and take that 6th, 7th inning kind of thing.
I
Yeah.
like that one. Yeah, that's a good pick. And then, of course, if they could find a way to shake Shane Bieber and bring him in and have him in the rotation at some point at the end of 2025,
It's
that would be nice.
yeah. Give him a chance to rehab in 25. He might be in the minors all year. Who knows? But 26, he comes in. He can be.
That's a former All-Star starting pitching.
Yeah, that's a dude. That's a dude that legitimately helps. He's a Cy Young Award winner, 2-time All-Star, Gold Glover, 4th place MVP finisher. If you can get a guy like that, I don't know what it's going to cost, but obviously that's no as much expensive as the 3, but you could do it.
Yeah, and
And
before he
then
got hurt, before Bieber got hurt, he did some stuff this past offseason at Driveline, and before his injury, he looked really good. So I think if he rehabs correctly, I think that we'll see a really good Shane Bieber still, even though he's getting up there in age. I still think that he's got a couple of years left in the tank.
Yeah. Pulling this up, he made 2 starts, 2-0, no runs allowed, 10 hits, 1 walk to 20 strikeouts in 12 innings. The other option, and I'll go I think a little quicker on this, is taking a reliever and making them into a starter, right? We saw it work with Ronaldo Lopez. We're seeing it work with Grant Holmes. They're going to stretch him out over the offseason. He did great work. There's a couple guys that I like different. Obviously, you have to acquire some of them. They're not all free agents. Shintaro Fujinami is a free agent, signed with the Oakland A's in 2023, was not good as a starter. They gave up on him after 7 starts. Was not great in the Mets minor league system this year. Was also dealing with injuries, only pitched 32 innings. I really think there's something you can do there with him to fix him, his stuff. 4-seamer, splitter, cutter, sweeper, slider. It's not a great mix. Nothing drops below the zone, right? The split is more of traditional changeup movement than a usual splitter movement. It runs back to the arm side. He's got a sweeper, so it's going the other way. The cutter stays right dead center of the plate. I don't know what he's doing with that. He threw like just a few sliders over the course of the year. They're just like bigger cutters. I really think if Atlanta gives him one of those Spencer Strider-esque gyro sliders, you can really get something vertically breaking down, fastball up, sweeper, slider, splitter. You get all 4 directions covered. I do think there's some work they can do on the control, things like that. He can be a much better guy than what we've seen in the past. I really like that one. And then there's guys across baseball who could absolutely become starters if you can get them. Maybe it's something Cade Smith of the Cleveland Guardians. They have no plans to stretch him out. We don't really think they will. Maybe you can acquire him for cheap, give him some time in the minors to work out. Adrian Morjon of the San Diego Padres, Justin Slayton of the Boston Red Sox. Maybe that's something. Maybe you can go get those guys. I don't know. There's free agents as well. I just think that's an area the Braves have 40-man spots that nobody else is going to have. They're not going to take a guy in the Rule 5 draft because you got to keep that guy in the majors all year, and they can't afford that. But maybe you can go grab some undervalued guys and convert them to starters. And I think that both of those things are great uses of the 40-man space that nobody else is going to have.
Yeah, also really good points there. There's a lot of good names there. Will the Braves go back to the well? Will they go back to the well and make a trade with the Chicago White Sox? Is there anything left of that team? That's a real
Garrett Crochet is left.
That could be a conversation. Maybe
I don't know.
Deal.
I don't know what Atlanta has to give for Garrett Crochet. That would be super cool if it happened. I just don't know what they have to give. We'll explore that down the road a little bit when we get out of the end of the season and we find out what Atlanta's doing with some of these guys and how many spots you have and what assets you have. We'll probably look into something like that. But in the meantime, if you're listening on the audio, again, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, same thing. We need to get to 20 so that we can get the algorithms to start pushing us to new people. And subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell when we drop a new episode because they're coming just about daily. And until next time, this has been Braves Today.